Welcome to Eye of the Care Storm, where care leaders are given a voice because care can be hard, shifts run long, and storms hit fast.
But right in the middle of the storm, at the eye, there is calm. That's what we're crafting here together as we spread the wisdom of care leaders today.
I'm Chris, co-hosting with Claire, and today's guest is Melanie Weatherly, MBE. She is a fellow at the National Institute of the Health and Care Excellence. She is a co-chair at Care Association Alliance. She is a chair at Lincolnshire Care Association, a fellow at Skills for Care, a chief exec at Walnut Care. I don't know when she gets to sleep, but if that doesn't speak for itself, I don't know what does. So, welcoming Melanie.
What we'd really like to understand is could you tell us a little bit about your past to help us understand who you've come today?
Yes, and I think I came to care by accident. Care is not my initial career. I was a chartered accountant to start with. Um, but on reflection, I was a young carer. My mother was ill most of from about my being about six, and I supported her in between going to school. But young carers weren't recognised at the time. And it was only when I was listening to one of my colleagues talking about young carers that I suddenly realised that that was probably where I came from initially and why I ended up doing what I'm doing. Because other than that, it looks like it was a complete accident. So once I'd qualified as an accountant, I worked in the corporate sector. I worked for the Chelsea family on their industrial side. When
Okay.
they found a really good product, they used to buy the company that made it, so that there was, and so values were superb right from the beginning of my professional career. There was no second best. Um, the family has been around since the 13th century. They know what they want. They expect you to provide it. So that was a really good grounding in good enough isn't, if you
Yeah.
like, but in a very safe environment. And I then went to Silicon Valley. My first management role was in West Coast America.
Mhm.
And management over there is very different than here. Employment, certainly in those days, was at will. If you upset your colleagues, they just walked because they could get another job within 24 hours. And I had a fantastic manager, a lady called Kim Chang, who knew all of her staff, knew exactly what switched us on. And so we, as young managers, would regularly work till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning to give her what she needed for Wall Street. And then we would go to the beach for a day, and the company knew we were going to the beach for the day because it was very outcomes focused. What does the company need, and how are we going to do it? And what do we need as people? I then came back to the UK as a young manager, assuming that everything worked like that all over the world, and got a real shock. So I decided I needed to be my own boss because I couldn't cope with let's all go to a meeting for 2 hours and not decide anything. And let's pretend we're at work when there actually isn't anything to do. So I started supporting my husband, who was working in as an accountant, and then we had a client in the care sector who got into trouble with the local inspection unit and safeguarding. He didn't understand, so he asked me to help him, and I went down to help him, read all the regulations, got him back on the straight and narrow, and he wanted to buy another care home. We found one and he said, it's too far away, too small. Why don't you put your money where your mouth is? You buy it. So I did, but it was never intended to be anything other than an investment.
Mm.
I got hooked. And I actually think that care is where I need to be. We couldn't deliver the care we wanted to do for the price that the local authority could afford to pay. So we moved into home care because
Mhm.
it's actually easier to improve the quality in home care without spending as much money because you're not buying the food, you're not providing the environment. And that's how I got into care. How did I get into more of a leadership role is a different story.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that's covered in some of our
We
later.
will do. We will come to that as we go on. But that's
Yeah,
phenomenal. Is that?
care was never where I intended to be, but it's absolutely where I need to be. I have probably never earned as little per hour since I was about 25, but it doesn't matter. But I'm lucky because I don't need to earn the huge money because I did that earlier.
Mm,
So I'm in a very privileged position that no, we're not rolling in money, but we're not dependent on every penny coming in because that we've got that background first. I would think if you're starting out in the care sector now, you have to have some money behind you.
mm. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. Thank you. Over to you, Chris.
Just to dig into that a little bit more, because I can feel your fire for it and your passion
Yeah.
for it. There's clearly something in there that's got you really hooked into this world of care. That you obviously mentioned that you didn't mean to be here, but there was something in it that has you felt a real match with. Um, where does that come from? What is that match? Where's that hook and that fire come from?
People. I think
Yeah.
I've always been interested in people. And when we first came into the care sector, when I didn't really understand it, I was always involved in the development of people. I was horrified that you could become a manager with responsibility for the health and well-being of 40, 50, 60 vulnerable adults with no training
Mm,
and no requirement to have the right knowledge. I was a graduate when I went into accountancy, but I had to get my professional qualifications or you just couldn't do the job. Well, money's important, but it's not as important as people. So from day one, I have been passionate about we have to upskill our people and recognize them properly because this is
mm,
whatever the government says from time to time, this is a highly skilled job. And the people that we support often don't have the ability to complain. So if the person we're supporting them doesn't have the right skills, they just don't have the right skills, and we carry on making people's lives worse when we should be making them better. So I think that's the hook. It's about the people that the workforce.
mm,
And then I when I first started, I went out to do care myself because I thought I can't. My philosophy has always been don't ask someone to do something that
mm,
you do yourself unless it's highly specialized like IT. Um, so I went out on home care, and as I've said, I've done some really what sounds like really exciting, fascinating stuff, but nothing is better than knowing that without you, someone could not have gone back home to their family to live their last few days and weeks.
mm,
You can't bottle it. It's worth a fortune, but that doesn't make it right that we exploit people who do that by then not paying them properly. Because yes, you absolutely fulfill the top end of Maslow every day in care, and that's great. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to pay the rent or the mortgage. So, yes, nothing is better than being able to support a family to have their loved ones there at the end, or being able to support someone who needs some independence encouragement to be living on their own and completely without support. I can't describe how that makes you feel. And if we could explain that to young people, we would have no recruitment problem at all. I actually think if we're going to do national service, let's do national service in the care sector. If everybody did a year in care, or if a gap year in care was an option, I think it would transform the way we delivered care.
I agree with you. Totally, and I've done an awful lot of work in the past, mainly in very similar fields, about that whole fact that this is a really privileged
Yes.
place to be working, but unfortunately, that privilege gets taken advantage of because if you are able to be with someone during their last hours or so, and unfortunately, when you are working in care, we've all been there. I've been in a room, with a family when a family member has died, and also done the round, in sort of the whole palliative care and everything. But that doesn't but I think the bit that is exploited, and this is a conversation for another day, and it'd be really interesting to dig in with another conversation, is because at the end of the day, there would be nowhere else I would rather be than be there, supporting that family, being the link, making sure that everything's in place, making sure that the person is comfortable during their last moments and the family is also comfortable. But unfortunately, people know that I would do that anyway, whether it's
Yeah.
excuse me, whether it's voluntary.
Yep. Yep. And we do exploit our staff as an economy, as a society, I think, not individually, but as a society, we exploit that. Yeah.
And I think this runs into the next question quite nicely because we mentioned the sort of operational side, the people side, the care side. Is to you at the minute, Melanie, which part of your job do you feel is most sort of fragile?
It's the constant change of policy. We and the fact that nobody seems to be listening. Yes, farms are important, pubs are important, but so is care. But we don't seem to be able to get the ear of either government or other decision makers. There's and I think that again is partly care providers will keep going. Certainly family-based care businesses will just keep going. Yeah. And that is almost sometimes exploited. And it's assumed that, well, we'll just keep going and we'll just keep going and we'll just keep going. And that does worry me that maybe one day we won't. And if one goes, we'll probably all go because we hold each other up as we're in that difficult point. And things like international recruitment is a good example. Yes, the introduction of the care visa was not well managed. And there are lots of people here who don't have a job, and some of them probably shouldn't have come. And there's been all kinds of really nasty, horrible stuff going on. But the people from overseas who are working in the care sector are what keeps it going. And they all recognise the privilege of supporting, particularly the older people. We haven't managed to grow a generation that sees that privilege at the moment. A lot of our millennials don't quite get that, and that's our fault as parents. But our overseas workers absolutely do. They are thrilled to be supporting older people. So we've closed the door. And then we said to them, and actually, you are so not welcome that you have to do an extra 5 years because somehow or other you don't contribute to society because we don't pay you enough, but we don't pay you enough because the government doesn't put enough money in. So that seems really, really cruel to the people who have given up their family life to support our family members. So it's changes like that. And then it's almost impossible then to have the right conversation with the right minister. Whereas, as I say, the hospitality trade appears to be able to do it and farmers appear to be able to do it. And maybe that's our fault as sector leaders that we don't get that message across. But I think it's also partly because we are this hybrid. Are we a public service or are we a private industry or are we somewhere in between? But that, I think, the day-to-day stuff, yes, there's lots of stresses and strains, but I can live with those. They don't make me super frustrated, but trying to talk to government does.
Yes, I mean, I completely concur with everything you said, and the frustrating thing for me is, and I spent many years working on different government groups and things, is that it's the short-sightedness of it without wanting to become too political, but it's just we need to invest in this area because you're right, at the moment it's to me, and you said that in one will go, it's just sort of like really it's like a game of Kaplunk, that we're all there and then there's so many straws that are gradually being removed and all the marbles stay in place. But what's going to happen? One of those marbles is going to go and the whole lot is going to come down. And I think this is the danger because we are caring and passionate people. And I know I can speak on behalf of the three people that are on, having this conversation here. If we were needed, we would go and we would step in. So and unfortunately that works against us. And I think it short started not only just to invest the investment in from a financial perspective, but I think you touch on a very good point again, one that we can maybe explore at a later date, is around when we're introducing a rich cultural variety of workers. We can learn a lot of actually how with the respect we show for older or vulnerable people, which we don't, which seems to be that there's a burden, certainly it seems that, like, oh, well, it seems that older people are a burden, and oh, we'll blame everything on the rise in the pressures on the NHS because people are living older. And rather than actually, well, should we just care for these people? Should we work with these people? Should we show there's that nurturance there, which we can learn? I'm doing an awful lot of work at the moment with South Asia, and it's very interesting to have conversations around their care and what's going on there. Like I say, we could spend a long time, I suspect, Melanie, the three of us having a conversation down that route. But I
Yep.
think you're planting a lot of flags that Chris and I will be able to do some callbacks in future, because we are looking, aren't we, Chris, at doing some wider roundtable discussions in the future. And I think you're flagging some good things that would make some good topics for roundtable conversations in the future. So moving on then, it'd be really interesting. You said about how you came into care and about those pivotal things that happened before you came in to care that were just like looking at the values, and collating and how that changed. Could you share a pivotal moment that has happened since you began this care journey that's really been something that's galvanized the reason that this is where I need to be, or this has changed the way in which I'm thinking about what I'm doing?
I think there are two, if you'll indulge me to give you two. And one is I took over the chairmanship of the Care Association Alliance just before the pandemic. And that's a group of 50 plus local care associations that support each other. And prior to the pandemic, we met 3 times a year in London, and we had guest speakers, and it was a very nice alliance. And then once the pandemic started, I can't remember how, but I gate crashed stroke was invited to one of the meetings with Minister Whately quite early on in the pandemic. And I was able to draw on my earlier experience working with the landed gentry and working in the corporate world, but also still doing care, and to bring those two together. So the Care Association Alliance then became invited to all of the think tanks, and also the amount of dialogue between the Department of Health and Social Care and the care sector massively changed during the pandemic, for the good, and most of it stayed. And the CAA started to meet weekly so that we could support each other. Sometimes they were just very cathartic sessions, an hour of, it's not me that's not doing this job properly, this is the way it is. And from being a sort of unknown grouping, we became one of the leading national bodies to support care providers. We represent between us just over 10,000 CQC locations, but we have no secretariat. It's all done on a voluntary basis, because across the 50 associations, we've got experts in everything. So we've got people who are good at immigration, people who understand how to work with politicians, people who've been union reps. So we are a true alliance. So I think that changed my role from being locally, I was chair of our care association, but I had no national presence, to now where I would say probably a third of my week is spent speaking on behalf of the grassroots. We're not interested in the size of the organisation. We all represent all kinds of shapes and sizes, but we are either providers or one step removed from providers, not 3 steps removed from providers. So I think we can tell it how it really is. And we can also be that good interface between government and national bodies and providers across the country. So that changed my life, shall I say? And certainly during the pandemic, it was overwhelming, or could have been overwhelming. It wasn't, because of the fact that we were all together. So even now with the weather, we're all talking to other local care associations and seeing if we can help, and we share best practice and we share concerns. The other pivotal moment was the day I got a letter saying I'd been awarded an MBE for services to social care. And I think at that point I realised that this is for real. This is not just me doing my thing, but actually it's having an impact. I had invented something called Care Home Trusted Assessors, with working with my local authority. And we'd managed to spread that across the country, which was the reason for the MBE. But up until that point, I suppose I was just doing what I did when I did it. And that letter and that award makes one realise that you have started to have a leadership role, and therefore you have to take what you do and what you say seriously. And that was prior to the pandemic, actually, because my investiture was cancelled because of lockdown.
Right.
It was great because then the Lord Lieutenant did it locally after COVID, and I had 60 people from across my life with me, rather than just being one in a queue. So those are probably the two things, that one that made me realise I did have a leadership role, and the second one that allowed me to do it.
Perfect. Can I just ask a couple of questions, just points from that, and then before I hand over to Chris, because I'm sure he's got some comments to make as well. So with regard to your first point, and how fantastic that you've now got this platform, and which is a really, really important and vital platform to have, that pivotal platform between the government and providers. I'm going to ask you a question you may not want to ask her, but I am going to ask it anyway. Do you feel listened to? You've got the platform, but do you feel listened to?
Sometimes, yes. And I think what helps me to feel listened to is I don't always do the talking. So across the local associations, we have some really good younger leaders, some of whom I hope you'll be able to talk to in future.
Lovely.
And so often, so we do a lot of work with CQC, but there are two young care association chief execs who are also providers who've experienced CQC, so they have that dialogue, and that has been listened to. We know that's been listened to because we can see the results of it. So not as much as I would like to, because I think sometimes it's politicians and civil servants, and you have to manage both, and sometimes it takes a long time. But I found that one of the differences probably between the Alliance and some of the other national bodies is we are very solution focused, probably because we're all, or mostly, family businesses, and you have to find a solution or you won't be here. So although we will lobby, we tend to lobby with a solution, and we try to find a partner to lobby with. So if we're working with the local authority, we would go with the local authority to government, rather than against the local authority, because they haven't got any more power than we have. So I think we try to find alliances and we try to come up with a solution. And that does help you get listened to. But it's not always, and it's very rarely quick. And they keep changing. You just get relationship with the right set of civil servants, and then they all move. So you can start again. And social care is not a well-known sector. People who come into the DHSC understand health, or they think they do. They've no idea what social care is. We don't even talk about the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care on the radio. People still talk about Secretary of State for Health. He's not. And our current Secretary of State is very clear that he's not. He is both. So social care is that, it's still that invisible service that you don't know about till you need it. And then boy, do you know about it. And boy, do you know how broken it is. So yes, sometimes we do get listened to, but not as much as I would like to. Often because, as I say, we know that if we could work better with the NHS, and we can see it in pockets of the country, we can improve the quality of life for citizens massively and save money.
Mm.
We're not working together. We don't know what they want or need that we could do, and they don't know what we can offer. So that's where we need to be. We need to be in that, let us work together. Let us get on with it.
Yeah. I mean, the two key words I took from there amongst everything else are, alliance and solutions. And I
Yeah.
think that they're two watchwords as we go on. Chris, sorry, over to you. I'm dominating.
No, it's absolutely brilliant. And there's clearly been some moments in there, Melanie, where you've made some critical decisions and made some changes. And there's been grouping together with other providers and speaking up together and making those alliances. And you also mentioned the assessment that you created and you rolled that out nationwide. So there's been some critical decision moments when you face these challenges. I'm just wondering what has helped you in preparing and creating, making those decisions.
I think part of it is my early grounding in being a professional and making sure that you've listened to everybody who might be affected. There's no point solving our problem if it makes more of a problem for somebody else in the system. So you need to more than triangulate, you need to listen to everybody in the system. But also, I've had some fabulous mentors. Our Director of Adult Social Services, when I took over the Lincolnshire Care Association, was Glenn Garrard. Glenn is an amazing guy, really open-minded, very much in the listening mode. And if you can convince him that something completely off the wall, like the care home trusted assessors, we wanted to completely upend the way people were discharged from hospital to care homes, and he backed it. So people like that, I make sure that I'm testing things with people who I trust and who I know will tell me the real answer, if you like. But then, and I don't know whether this is an acceptable thing to say, my faith is central to my life. I often say that I have more than one eye on that final contract meeting, the one that really matters. So I will always pray before I make a critical decision. You could describe that as reflection if you don't have a faith, but to me, that's important that you don't become totally caught up in the moment. So I do think finding out what impact the decision is going to have on other people, talking to trusted mentors, and then I would call it praying. Some people might call it reflecting before you make a decision. But also, I think being aware of the impact of the decision you're going to make. So don't make it off the cuff. And that became very obvious during COVID when we were given potential policies and asked to comment on them, and realizing that between us as care sector leaders, what we said did make a difference because the policy got changed because we redrafted it. So I think that's how I prepare for critical decisions.
That's absolutely great, and I think that you're right. Whatever, I mean, it's just that point of whether you have a faith or it's just that taking that moment and thinking, actually, what is the spirit with which we're doing this? Why are we doing this? What are the ethics that underpin this? Going back to your point way back when you were saying about like the strong value based, I think it's just gives us that strength to go, actually, this is, and I know when I used to present on lots of keynotes when people were going through sort of turbulent times, I'd always start with saying, why do you do what you do? And people would always start first 2 minutes afterwards, they'd be going, oh, God, don't ask me, it's not for the money. But then I go, no, literally take a moment to think, why do you do what you do? And it is like you say, in that moment of prayer for you, but it's just before you make that critical decision, it's just taking that moment, taking that time to think, what's important here? What's our value based here? At the end of the day, what really, really matters? So moving on from that, and the fact of we've got this consistent theme with the alliance, and the thing with any alliance is the fact of the need for consistency, the need for one voice, and also with regard to the other initiatives that you've introduced. So if we are thinking about a consistent care quality, which is what we want. So everybody knows what good looks like. We're not prepared to take anything less, no matter where your point of entry is, no matter what service you're going, you have this consistent care quality. What advice, prompts, thoughts would you give to colleagues who are listening to this to think how you create a consistent care quality with a fluid staff group? Whether that's you've got different homes, or whether you've got some people that are coming in working different shifts, or whether you've got a lot of people that are coming in on agency. How, when there are so many fluid dimensions to social care, do you think that we can create that consistent quality?
I think it's easier to describe that in terms of my theoretical day job, which is as the chief exec of Walnut Care, which is a home care organisation.
Mhm.
And we aren't huge. We have about 150 care workers, but we're quite big. And I think it's really important that from day one they feel nurtured. So
Mhm.
we make the effort to meet everybody during their induction period. Their induction day is critical. If you get that wrong, then you won't get the consistent quality because you won't get the right values across. And there may be people who you've done the interview on a values based, you've selected them, but at the end of induction training, their values are not right. And you do need to take the decision, however hard that might be in terms of rota planning. If their values are not right and you don't think you're going to get the quality, then you need to part company at that point. And sometimes, sadly, that is people who have got previous experience in the sector. I don't think I've ever found anybody we've recruited brand new where we've doubted their values by the end of the induction. They might have said, this is not for me, which is also fine. But sometimes people who've worked for companies where poorer care quality is acceptable
Mm.
find it a challenge to switch to something that I would find acceptable. So I think there's that. And I think it's also about walking the walk in the horrible West Coast American term. If you want people to deliver high quality person centered care, then they have to experience high quality person centered employment and management. So I think the manager, whether that's a team leader in home care or a registered manager in the care home, and that takes me back to when I first joined the sector, we don't invest enough in upskilling those people.
Mm.
So we have registered managers who are frazzled and who don't get the best out of their staff because they don't have those tools in their armory. Even the Registered Managers Award and the level 5 is all about the technical stuff. That's not what matters. This is a people business. You need to know where the on switch is for everybody that works for you and where the off switch is, because that way you get the most out of people. And is that manipulative, exploitative employment and management? Possibly. So I know who would respond well to being offered extra money for a shift and who would respond better to being asked if they can help because their skills and expertise are absolutely valuable. And I would use the right entry into the discussion depending on who they were.
Mm.
As I could possibly describe that as manipulative, but I don't take it that far. But there's no point offering someone money who that wouldn't be important to. What they need to feel is that. So we have a lot of semi-retired staff. Offering them money for an extra shift is irrelevant. What matters is we've got a new member of staff who needs mentoring. They need your expertise. I know you don't normally work Wednesday, but would you mind? Because that meets their needs. And I think that we spend hours talking about person-centered care and meeting outcomes and meeting goals. And it's like, yeah, but actually, if you treat all of your care staff like that, they'll do all that for you. You
Mm.
don't need thousands of people doing all of that quality assurance and care plan reviews. Your care staff will do it if they understand what it is. So I would say to anybody coming into this sector, if you're not interested in growing people, put your money somewhere else. This is not the right sector for you. But if you are prepared to invest in upskilling your team, A, they will stay. They may go because somebody across the road's paying 5p an hour more, but they'll come back and they will enable you as an organisation to deliver the care at the quality standard that you want, particularly in home care, but to a certain extent in care homes. I have no idea on a day-to-day basis exactly what my staff are doing. It's behind closed doors in people's individual homes. They often can't or wouldn't complain. So I have to trust those people. I have to know that they are going to want to deliver the best possible service. And if you don't invest that at the beginning, then it doesn't work. And just to sort of say what we do at the end of the induction, there is a fabulous ice cream shop in Spilsby, which is where my learning centre is. And we all go to the ice cream shop and there is a choice of 4 cones or tubs, 7 or 8 flavours and different toppings. And everybody has their own. And then we come back and I say, if I'd brought you all a Magnum, you'd have been happy. But what you've got now is a person-centred ice cream. And you're really happy about that. And it's fabulous for you. And we did it one day by accident because we had a gap in the induction because everybody had finished early. And I suddenly thought, what are we going to do? I would go to Dennett's to the ice cream shop. But it makes it easier to then introduce the difference between task-based care, which meets the needs, and person-centred care, which sets up your day. So, and we do that with every induction course now. It also helps from a marketing point of view because the local area know that you have got new staff and they know they've met the staff. And it's little stuff like that, I think, that makes the difference. It doesn't cost lots of money, but it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'm not going to say any more because I know, Chris, this leads on to your next point that you want to discuss.
Yeah, so I think there's so much in that. And I love the person make the personalized cream
Brilliant.
it is brilliant. And really understanding the person and what drives them and aligning that with what will make them feel valued. Because I think you've really touched on really nicely on that it's not just about the money. They could leave for 5 pence extra somewhere else, more than that. But they'll come back because there's that feeling of feeling acknowledged values and what they can contribute to is what's going to fill them up and feel energized. And that's actually more sustainable long term than the paycheck that's very black and white, but it doesn't deliver and fulfill those needs. And that is so much more critical. So
Yeah, and I think it's important that as people become leaders and managers, they all understand the why we do things, not just what we do. We don't just buy everybody an ice cream because it's a nice thing to do. So everybody who is delivering that induction session needs to understand that. So you have to carry on investing in people as they stay with you to keep going back to. Don't tell people what to do, tell them why as well. And I think that's probably, if I had to put it in one line, it would be remember the why and not just the what.
yeah, yeah, I love that. Yeah, I mean it's so much more values based and it just goes so much further. I think the what we can get caught up in the what and the doing, the day to day, doing. But the why is what makes it long term. And I'd love to talk a bit more about that long term piece. That's my next question is about retention for long term because you mentioned onboarding and your sort of processes for getting those people who are new to the house, like the manager with them, they're modeling that manager. The values are very clear in what the standards are and the expectations there, and that goes on for a week or so. But beyond that first week, and they stick and you're happy with it for onboarding them, and beyond onboarding, what happens? What's the strategy for retention there?
I think that there's a couple of things. Firstly, because we are lone working, we do a daily handover, which is a bit like the kind of huddle you have in a hospital ward or a care home, where everybody rings their immediate supervisor or a designated person, because we don't expect their team leaders to work 7 days a week. And it's a structured questionnaire so that we pick up trends of how our service users are that aren't big enough for somebody to report at the time, but might over a period of time need intervention. But the most important part about it is that every day everybody speaks to someone who cares about them. And it only takes 3 minutes per person. Every time we get a new go-getting manager, they say, oh, you could do this by text or you could do it electronically. No, you can't, because you can't talk to someone electronically. I can't hear the tone of voice through a text message. So that's one thing. And the other one is continue learning and development. We decided 18 months ago to invest heavily in learning and development. We have a separate building with its own classroom and a simulation suite, and we support people with paid classroom time to do their new level 2 care certificate. We weren't sure whether it was a good idea at the beginning, but actually the retention rate of those learning cohorts has been phenomenal, because every 2 weeks they come together with people who aren't their line manager and their cohort. And yes, they learn. And a lot of them have said it's much better to learn over 6 months what they're actually doing and how they're doing it and why they're doing it. But I don't think it is just the learning. I think it's the fact that somebody pays them for 3 hours a fortnight, which is not really a lot, is it, to learn, but that they've got a cohort of people who they can share. Oh, how are you finding it now that you're working on your own? You know, what's the weather like, and driving for new drivers in this kind of weather. But also they meet a senior member of staff in one of the trainers who isn't their line manager. And we provide the level 3 support. We do our own assessment of level 3s within the organisation. So I think being able to continuously develop people, it shows me who really probably shouldn't be with us, because I think everybody should always be learning. But actually, we've never found only one or two. Most people, when you say we just discovered this, the Open University do a free course on Parkinson's. And to offer people the opportunity, just follow this link and you can get an OU accredited qualification. A small qualification. But most of the people I think who work in care soak up new knowledge like sponges. And I think that's really important, that we have people whose job it is to go look for, well, how can we do it? And we bring in the district nurse to talk about catheter care. The care staff love it because they know more. The district nurse loves it because they got reassurance that our team understand what they're doing and will ask if they're not sure. So I think it's not massively expensive in terms of financial outlay, but it is in terms of making sure everybody's doing it. Everybody should be learning. Everybody should be offering the opportunity to, how can we improve our care? How can we improve our record keeping? And we include our service users in that as well. We talk to our service users every 28 days to ask them for what's working, what's not working. It drives some of them mad. You know, if I wanted to tell you anything, I would. Yeah, but we're just going to ask you to every 28 days. And again, if you do it regularly, it doesn't take forever. It's not a huge quality assurance process. It's just like, I liken it to checking your oil and water in your car. It's not an MOT. We do that as well, but it's just and have you got any ideas? And if people say, well, have you thought about making a note of this? Have you thought about doing that? And all of our record keeping has pictures all over it, so that it looks like it's as least clinical as it possibly can do, because that's not what we are. We're not the health service. We're there to support you to live, as the fantastic phrase is, gloriously ordinary lives. And we try to deliver everything in a way that is what we're doing. We liken ourselves to, we are the family member with the right skills, not the clinician.
Yeah, I love that, because you're creating a feeling of momentum and
Mm.
not this standstill kind of
Yes.
thing. And I think that goes a long way into people feeling like their own, people value their own growth. And if they don't feel like they're growing, then that's when people can really waver from, oh, is the grass greener on the other side somewhere else? Because do I need to progress in another way? But that providing that momentum for them is, well, I mean, a huge retention thing. Huge.
And it doesn't stop the job being difficult, challenging, underpaid, undervalued, on some days frustrating. It doesn't, like, I'm not blind to that. It is still a really difficult job. And if you're getting shouted at in every third call because you're late because the weather's bad, that's hard. But at least if you talk to somebody every 24 hours, you can offload that. And also, and without giving away all of our corporate secrets, having your own assessment centre extends people's careers because home care is physically demanding. And there is an age at which it becomes almost impossible physically to earn your living as a home care worker. But if you're prepared to do the training to become an assessor, you can do 50% care, 50% assessing, and that can extend your career by maybe 4 or 5 years. Again, from our perspective, that's quite expensive because getting someone to that level of qualification is quite expensive, but it pays dividends. And not everybody is a staff leader role person. Not everybody is going to be a team leader, but they might be a really good trainer. So we try to offer people, once they've got to that level 3 senior care role, would you want to go into management? Do you want to go into training, or do you want to become a subject expert? So that there is that. Or actually, do you want to stay as a senior care? Because you can stay as a senior carer and become a subject expert. You can be our champion in safeguarding or dementia. So there's always that career structure if you want to carry on growing without having to be a team leader, because not everybody's cut out to manage staff. Some people would be very, very much a square peg in a round hole. So find a square, if you've got a square peg and they've got the right values, find a square hole. And if there isn't one, cut one out.
Yeah,
I love
yeah,
that.
perfect. Yes, craft. Yeah,
The West Coast American manager in me talking.
nothing wrong with that. And I just think that, then so as we move towards the end of our conversation, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, things we thought today. I mean, not least if we take nothing away from today, the fact that every day everyone gets spoken to by someone who generally cares about them. I mean, I think that that's just a good way for all of us to live our lives. And like I say, if as human beings beyond people who work in the care sector, the thought that there may be any individuals that go a day without speaking to somebody who cares for them. And I think what I particularly like about that, Melanie, is the fact that let's remember the people that are providing the care. Because so often, if we said that sentence in the social care sector, everyone would immediately think it's those people we're caring for. And it's so easy to forget the individuals that are providing the care, who are absolutely essential. So the last sort of formal point, really, from us before I hand over to Chris to sort of do the sort of plenary mop up, is we've heard from those earliest of days when you were, even though you didn't even realize it, but you were a young carer, you just happened to be a young child who was caring, that has now got a title and is now acknowledged but wasn't at the time, who moved and threw and drew and then got motivated. We've heard about how you continually motivate other people, not just with those people within your formal CEO role, the day job, which ironically is most possibly happens like here. Yes, not just during daylight hours, we know, but also you motivate people at a national level. So, what we'd like to know, Melanie, what continues to motivate you?
That's the easiest question you've asked me. There are two things that motivate me. One is the people who provide the care, and the other is the people that we provide care and support to.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it's been that all along, hasn't it? From
Yeah.
the start, since we got
Yeah.
hooked,
Oh,
since the
and you
beginning.
do have to have enough money coming in to meet the outgoings. I'm not completely people focused. Well, I am, because I think if you get those two bits right,
Mm-hmm.
the money takes care of itself. And I absolutely think that as a nation, if we did that bit of care right, we would have so much money left in the NHS, we wouldn't know what to do with it.
I don't disagree at all. And it's interesting that we've sort of come to that point, going back to the begin with, when you sort of said that, you said actually to begin with, it was just like a business. You didn't, you set up as a business. Whereas when you said that at the time, I thought this wasn't just a business. And we all on this call know that, and I've certainly spent an awful lot of time with people that have just purely gone in, that have got the money, that see it as a money making mechanism. But the reason it doesn't last isn't because they haven't got the money behind it, it's because they haven't got the people behind it.
If you just want to make money, from my original roles, I could suggest much better places to invest. If
Yeah.
you want to make a living and pick up all the other things, then it's absolutely the right place to be. And we do have to be able to make a living.
Mm.
I think that worries me at the moment, that there's two parts to the sector. There are people in the sector who manage to make an awful lot of money,
Mm.
but there are an awful lot of people in the sector who just want to make a living and a reasonable return on the hundreds of thousands of pounds they've invested,
Mm.
and they can't. And
Mm.
they are the people that we need to protect, because it's those businesses and not-for-profit organisations that deliver good quality care and good quality employment. But my fear is that they are very much, very, very fragile at the moment.
Mm.
And I think that links directly with your comment previously when we were talking about staff onboarding and understanding their why, not the what, is that some people are not in it for the money and leave because some people are just in it for because of the people and to provide that. And that's not just for the staff being onboarded, but there's providers out there and at a national level out there
Yes,
who are
lots and
in,
lots of providers are not in it for the money, but and again, it's like the staff are not in it for the money, but they have to be paid a reasonable wage.
yeah,
We're not in it for the money, but we can't go bust either.
yeah.
And I think that that's the thing, is ultimately we shouldn't be embarrassed about the fact that we have got to run these organisations like businesses, because we will only be able to continue to make a difference, make an impact, if we have the infrastructure behind us to put us in that position to do it. And we shouldn't be embarrassed about being very honest and open about it.
We should look at our GP colleagues and learn from them. They don't do it just for the money, but they are very able to say, but if you want me to do X, Y, and Z, I need these resources.
Mm.
And that's what we need to do. We need to watch them and think, and maybe work with them, because they are very similar to us.
Mm.
They're all independent businesses, but dependent on the state for their income. They're just an awful lot better at doing it than we are.
Mm. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Chris,
Did you
over
have,
to you.
I didn't know if you had one more comment on that, Claire. So to wrap
To be
up, I
honest
think,
with you, Chris, I could, but I'm very, very
yeah,
conscious of
well,
time. I
Yeah.
feel as
all
if we
good.
could start a whole new
We
conversation,
could,
a
yes.
new conversation. What I
Perhaps,
want to do, and I'm going to say this now because is that what I'm desperate to do is at a later date we invite Melanie back to one of our round tables and we unpick some of these conversations in a broader conversation, because I
Yeah,
think there have been lots of little mic drop moments
there has.
throughout this discussion that we could pick up and run with.
Yeah, so I guess this to be continued. Today has been really wonderful, Melanie. I think the real theme today has hugely been around people. I mean, there's for you as you started your journey, you were caring, but you weren't in the care space initially. You got hooked on it because of the people that sparked the fire in there. And then we talk about people in terms of alliances, is not, communication from provider level, national level, government level, that communication side, how people are actually communicating in that way to talk about needs, because we that's another part that we talked about, the needs in terms of onboarding staff, keeping the staff, meeting those needs from provider level, from the financial side, so the business can keep running and provide care not just to, well, look after their teams so that they can earn a living, but therefore provide really great care, and the strategies behind that. And yeah, people has been really centered to this, and I think it's been a fantastic conversation. At this point, we would typically say, who'd you like to invite on next? We don't have that. I know we don't have that answer right now. So what we'll do instead is, I know you'll be finding someone to call up to the stage to Eye of the Care Storm podcast. And we'll ask you to, we'll put someone in the comments below to do that. We'll do that at a later time. All right, but really wonderful conversation today. Thank you so much, Melanie.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it and look forward to speaking to you again in the future.
It's wonderful, and it's great to speak to somebody that has introduced the phrase to me today, gloriously ordinary lives, that is in the process of living a gloriously extraordinary life in a wonderful, really inspiring way. So thank you so much for giving Chris and I your time, Melanie, on your incredibly busy schedule.
And
No
the
problem.
personalized ice cream method, that needs trademarking.
Thank you. Bye.
All
Bye.
right.
Take
See
care.
you.
Thank you, Melanie.